Right Honourable Gavin Williamson.
With permission, Mr. Speaker, I'd like to make a statement regarding the full opening of our schools and colleges to all pupils in September. I know these past 3 months have been some of the most challenging that schools, parents, and most of all children have faced. What schools have achieved to make sure that children and young people are kept safe and can continue to learn during this period is remarkable, and I think in this House we're all deeply grateful for those efforts. But we all know the impact that lost time in education can have on our children's outcomes. Every child and young person in the country has experienced unprecedented disruption to their learning as a result of coronavirus, with those from the most vulnerable and disadvantaged backgrounds amongst the hardest hit. Education recovery is critical for this generation of school children. Returning to normal educational routines as quickly as possible is critical to our national recovery too. That is why we've been working to ensure that all pupils will be able to go back to schools and colleges full-time in September, with COVID-secure measures in place so that they have the opportunity to thrive and fulfil their full potential. Today, the government has published detailed plans for nurseries, schools and colleges that set out what is needed to plan for a full return, as well as reassuring parents and carers about what to expect for their children. The guidance has been developed with medical experts from Public Health England and follows regular engagement throughout the outbreak between the government and the education sector. We continue to work closely with the country's best scientific and medical experts to ensure that both children and staff are always as safe as possible. Schools will continue minimising contact between children, including through grouping children together in bubbles and encouraging older children to distance. At a minimum, this will mean keeping whole year groups in schools and colleges separate. This is in addition to the other protective measures that we know are so important for infection control, such as regular cleaning and hand washing. We're also ensuring testing is readily available so that parents, teachers and students can return with confidence. All staff, pupils and their families will continue to have access to testing if they develop COVID-19 symptoms. By the start of the autumn term, we will provide all schools and colleges with a small number of home testing kits. These will be taken home by children or staff who develop symptoms while on site, but who would struggle to access a testing centre. This is so that they can have a test quickly and they can get the results back quickly. All schools will have access to direct support and advice from their local Public Health England health protection team to deal with any cases that may occur. They will be advised on what steps need to be taken. Mr. Speaker, in these challenging times, we are committed to ensuring the nation's children have not just a safe education, but also an excellent one. From September, we are asking schools and colleges to return to a broad and balanced curriculum so that all pupils continue to be taught in a wide range of subjects, maintaining their choices for further study and employment. We expect exams to go ahead in the summer of 2021. We understand the additional pressures on teaching staff to deliver such high standards of education in this difficult period. As such, as Ofsted inspectors are preparing to visit schools in the autumn, it will be to discuss how they are managing the return to full education of all their pupils. The insight that inspectors gather will also be aggregated nationally to share learning with the whole sector, the government and the wider public. It is our intention for full inspections to return from January. We're also providing significant financial support to help pupils catch up on lost learning. As I announced in June, we'll be providing a £1 billion COVID catch-up package, including a £650 million catch-up premium for state-funded primary, secondary and special schools, and a £350 million national tutoring programme for the most disadvantaged pupils. Evidence shows that 6 to 12 weeks of tutoring for a disadvantaged pupil can result in 5 months of catch-up. Schools are held accountable for the outcomes they achieve with their funding, including through Ofsted inspections, and the COVID catch-up funding will be no exception to this. It is critical to ensure that no child loses more time in education, and that from September, all children who can be at school are at school. Schools and colleges will need to work with families to secure regular attendance from the start of a new academic year, with the reintroduction of mandatory attendance. Our intention is that those with education, health and care plans or special educational needs will also be back in school or college in September. Since May, as a result of the pandemic, it has been necessary to modify the duty on local authorities and health commissioners so that they could use their reasonable endeavours to secure or arrange for provision of EHC plans. I'm committed to removing these flexibilities as soon as possible so children and young people can receive the support they need to return to school. As such, unless the evidence changes, I will not be issuing further national notices to modify the EHC duties. We will, however, consider whether any such flexibilities may be required locally to respond to outbreaks in different parts of the country. In addition, I'm pleased to announce that as we continue on the road to recovery and infection rates continue to fall, from the 20th of July, nurseries, childminders and other childcare providers will no longer be required to place limits on the group size of children who can play and learn together. Mr. Speaker, I'd like to take this opportunity to thank those parts of the sector who've already opened their doors to more children and who are doing a phenomenal job to help our children and our young people settle back into their usual routines. Since schools and nurseries began to open more widely on the 1st of June, we've seen the number of children attending schools steadily rise, with over 1.6 million pupils already back in school. I'm sure, Mr. Speaker, I'll be joined by the House as I express my thanks to all of the childcare, school and further education staff who have gone above and beyond since March and who will continue to do so as we prepare to welcome all of our children and young people back to school and college in September. I commend this statement to the House.
Can I welcome the new Shadow Secretary of State for Education, Kate Green?
Very much, Mr. Speaker, and may I thank the Secretary of State for his statement and for an advance copy of it. And may I also thank him for his call last night. I very much look forward to working with him. Mr. Speaker, every child must be safely back in school in September. By then, many children will have experienced nearly 6 months' gap in their education. Some have been able to maintain their learning during that period, but there's been a huge gap in learning for others, especially the most disadvantaged. A senior official in the Secretary of State's own department has warned the attainment gap could widen by as much as 75% as a result of the crisis. Today's announcement finally recognises the desperate pleas of heads, staff and governors for information and certainty about plans for the next academic year. For too long, the government's been asleep at the wheel. The announcement today comes just 3 weeks before the end of term, and an immense amount needs to be done to prepare. Mr. Speaker, staff have been working flat out since February half-term. And I too want to thank teachers, school leaders and everyone who works in our education settings for their exceptional efforts during these unprecedented times. Over the summer, they'll need a break. And as they prepare plans for return, they will also need the active support of the department. This can't be left to heads to struggle through on their own. So I have a number of questions for the Right Honourable Gentleman. What consultation has been undertaken in preparing this guidance with heads, teachers and school staff, governors and unions who've made many sensible and practical suggestions for students' return? The government needs to learn from its previous mistakes. That's why Labour suggested a task force of school leavers, which would have meant we could have brought children back to school sooner. Can the Secretary of State guarantee every school will have full access to testing and tracing, all the PPE and other resources they need to open safely? The government's track record has not been impressive so far, and we can't allow any further failure to supply these safety essentials to prevent children's return. I support the Secretary of State in reintroducing compulsory attendance. But fining poor parents will not serve the best interests of their children. Parents need reassurance that their children will be safe, especially in communities, including ethnic minority communities, where the prevalence of COVID is higher. Many children will have found the past few months unsettling, even traumatic. What is needed is a trauma-informed approach to school and to families. Staggered starts may present difficult challenges for parents. Can the Secretary of State say more about wraparound care for families and transport arrangements for children to travel to school? Can he confirm all children are expected to be in school in September? Will there be a delay in incoming reception children starting school? In relation to early years, what financial support will be available for parents or for childcare providers to protect their viability if children can't attend or settings are forced to close? I welcome the recognition of the needs of children with special educational needs and disabilities and the assurances on education, health and care plans. Can the Secretary of State guarantee to the House that the needs of those children will be met in full? On the curriculum, does he agree with me that a broad curriculum, including arts and humanities, supports children's attainment in the core subjects too? What discussions with FE providers have taken place about how they'll provide the, and I quote, full education envisaged? And can he say a little more about plans for students due to sit exams? What about homeschooled children that schools refuse to assess? There's a huge divide opening up between children who've had a good study experience at home and those who've lacked the resources to learn. Ofqual must address that in its recommendations for arrangements for exams next year. Announcement of the £1 billion catch-up funding is welcome, but can you confirm this is all new money and won't be funded by cuts elsewhere? What guarantee can he give of the availability of sufficient high-quality tutoring capacity with tutors expert in the subjects they'll teach? Does he share my concern that requiring schools to contribute 25% of the cost of the national tutoring programme advantages the better-off schools? Why have post-16 students been excluded from catch-up funding support? On Tuesday, it was reported that the 230,000 laptops that had been promised for children lacking full digital access had not been delivered in full as promised by the end of June. When will they arrive? And finally, the 6-week-long summer holiday always widens the attainment gap, and this year that will be exacerbated by the time already spent out of school. What activities and support are being put in place for the summer break? The funding for pupils on free school meals is welcome, but what of children who become eligible for free school meals during the summer holiday? Can the Secretary of State guarantee that no eligible child will miss out?
Secretary of State.
Well, I'd very much like to congratulate the Honourable Lady on her new role, and I very much look forward to working with her in terms of some of the great challenges that our nation faces over the coming months as we focus on the recovery for our education sector after this pandemic. I want to assure her in terms of a curriculum about the importance it has to be a full, broad and balanced curriculum, and that includes the arts and humanities. It includes sports. It includes so much, because we recognise that to give children the best opportunity to succeed in life, they have to have that breadth of curriculum, and we should not be seen to be dumbing down or reducing it. We have to give children choices. That is good for their future attainment, their future life chances, but also for their mental health as well, of having that breadth that is so vital for them to succeed. She is right, absolutely right, to highlight the importance of those children with special educational needs and how we need to be supporting them and helping them. We've seen some brilliant examples, especially in some of our special schools, who have gone so far and above in terms of helping not just for children, but also for parents at this most difficult and challenging time. But as all schools return, and this is why it's absolutely vital, it's got to be clear that educational and healthcare plans are properly adhered to by local authorities. This is why we've got to have this proper and full return of those obligations that local authorities have to be held to. I can assure her that it is new money for the COVID catch-up fund. We're looking forward to sharing more details with schools on this, and we'll be looking forward to working with schools, as we have been also with the Education Endowment Foundation, to making sure that that money is properly channelled into the areas that are going to make a real difference to children. It is right, and everyone in this House recognises the challenges and the significant loss that children have suffered as a result of not being in school. That's why we've got to bring all children back into school at the earliest possible opportunity. But it's equally making sure that this £1 billion is properly spent. That's why £350 million of it is being specially ring-fenced, to make sure that it's going to the children from the most disadvantaged backgrounds, and it is going to be focused on the evidence-based actions that we know will make a difference to those children. In terms of consultation, we have and will continue to consult widely within the sector. We've established a school stakeholder group with Trade Unions Congress and other unions, but more importantly, we've had much wider dialogue with people, not just trade unions, but also many other stakeholders, and most importantly, those who are delivering education on the ground. This is something that we have continuously been doing ever since the moment that we had to close schools in the first place, and we'll continue to do as we move forward.
We now go to the Chairman of the Education Select Committee, Robert Helfand.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. I strongly welcome the statement today and the guidance to help schools open fully in September. The plans for children with special educational needs are very good news, and also the £1 billion catch-up. We need to get our children learning again. Could I just ask the Secretary of State, given that the University College London have said that 2 million children during the lockdown have done virtually no schoolwork, and that the National Foundation for Education Research reported that 4 in 10 pupils are not in regular contact with their teacher, will he examine why this has occurred and look to Ofsted and the local authorities to work closely with schools and set clear guidance on online learning, homework and contact with teachers?
My right honourable friend is right to point to the importance of accountability measures that need to sit with schools at all stages. And I will be asking Ofsted to look at this, and I'll be asking Ofsted to examine closely in terms of what schools are doing in terms of their actions in order to ensure we have a continuity of education at all stages. And it will continue to be important to do this. because we will see situations in this country where you will have local lockdowns, and we need to ensure there is always a continuity of education in those communities.
Matt Weston.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. And can I also add my voice and congratulate and welcome my honourable friend, the member for Stretford and Urmston, on her new position. I just want to pick up on a point that she raised, and that is around the issue of laptops. And of course, we're well aware that the most disadvantaged children in our schools are at such a disadvantage in the educational setting. We know, though, that all children have been impacted by the failure to provide laptops, and that in answer to my written question on the 10th of June, I was told that 230,000 laptops have been ordered on the 19th of April. Government documents as of this week show that the first order was in fact placed on the 15th of May, which is correct.
Secretary of State.
I will write to the honourable gentleman with clarification on that matter.
Gareth Davis.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. The new Shadow Education Secretary used her first public statement to say that she looks forward to working with the unions. She talks about delays. Does my right honourable friend know if this means she agreed with the NEU's orders to not engage with the government's plan to get children back to school?
Order. These are actually questions that should be directed to Secretary of State. Secretary of State, I'm sure you'll find a way of answering that appropriately.
I think what we all share, and I know that my honourable friend has the absolute shared passion as I do, to see every child back in school, every school right across the country, getting their full curriculum in every class. And I hope that those people who have occasionally been tempted to try and block the full return of schools, those who have tried to frustrate the best efforts of head teachers and so many other teachers in their desire to see every child back, that they will recognise it's important and it is absolutely vital we do everything to see all children enjoying that first-class education that we all want them to see.
Helen Hayes.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. The coronavirus pandemic is threatening to undo 20 years of hard work by teachers, parents and governors in my constituency to successfully narrow the entertainment gap. It is widening and deepening existing disadvantage and disproportionately impacting BAME communities. The number of laptops so far provided by the government to enable online teaching barely scratches the surface of digital exclusion in Lambeth, Southwark and across the country. How will tutoring take place over the summer months when many of the most disadvantaged children still don't have access to home IT equipment?
On this side of the House, we've always been clear. We want to see every child back in school at the earliest opportunity, because we know that the best way of actually delivering education is in the classroom with a teacher at the front. And that is why not only have we had the incredibly ambitious plan in terms of rolling out laptops, and 202,000 of those laptops have already been provided, but we also accept that we want to do more. That's why we've got the COVID catch-up premium. That's why we've got the tutoring plans, and this is to be conducted within schools, and it's to be conducted with the support of teachers, all based on the Education Endowment Foundation's clear evidence about how we can deliver change and improvement for those children.
Clive Efford.
I'm delighted that the Secretary of State is now talking to teachers' representatives, their trade unions, but for too long they've denigrated them from that dispatch box, and that has led to people not believing the government when they talk about people being safe to return to schools. So if he is now consulting with the wider school community, can he say whether he's spoken to head teachers about the practicalities of every child going back, which must happen in September, and being able to stay in bubbles and separate year groups? What is the practicality of that in our schools?
I can absolutely assure the honourable gentleman that we've had extensive discussions with head teachers about these plans and consulted widely. I can also assure the honourable gentleman that I've met with unions every single week all the way through this crisis and made sure that we've had a regular dialogue in terms of sharing our plans. But it shouldn't be about trade unions as terms of dictating as to what we're doing best for our children. We want to work with trade unions, we want to work with the whole sector, including staff, in order to deliver the best education for all children. But we'll continue to have that dialogue. We have in the past and we will in the future.
To Dr. Caroline Johnson.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. Can I welcome my right honourable friend's statement that all children will be back in school in September? Now, despite the valiant efforts of parents, pupils and teachers, the majority of children have, at least to some extent, fallen behind, especially those with special educational needs and those from disadvantaged backgrounds. Could my right honourable friend please outline how he intends to help these children to catch up, whilst ensuring those who made more progress can continue to do so, so that every child reaches their full potential?
This is why we took the decision to make sure that in terms of our COVID catch-up plans, that there was money specifically targeted for those children who are most disadvantaged and those who schools will have the greatest challenge for. We're working very closely with the sector to make sure that there is targeted interventions for children with special educational needs, but equally recognising that all children, whatever their background and whatever part of the country they come from, will have be facing challenges in terms of the loss of education. And that is why we've done such an extensive £1 billion package to support schools in doing this.
Leila Moran.
Speaker, could the Secretary of State guarantee that every child who needs a laptop will have one? But does he also recognise that to create high-quality online lessons takes skill? And so what is he doing to ensure that best practice is spread among all schools before the summer holiday, so that as teachers make their plans, we can know that in September, high-quality learning will be available to all?
Well, I can absolutely assure the Honourable Lady that the work and endeavour to ensure that there's high quality teaching and online teaching is there. And we've seen that through the creation of the Oak National Academy. The Honourable Lady may have noticed the announcement just a few days ago about the expansion of that to continue to provide full and total curriculum across all year groups and across every single subject. This is one of a brilliant innovation, and I very much encourage the Honourable Lady and her constituents to take advantage of it.
Virginia Crosby.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. Our teachers are critical if we are to look after the next generation and to help us deliver our levelling up agenda. How is the Secretary of State supporting our hard-working supply teachers at this exceptional time? And how is he ensuring that our supply teachers are receiving appropriate remuneration?
Secretary of State.
Well, I know that my honourable friend has raised with me the concern that a number of supply teachers in her constituency of Anglesey has sort of suffered as a result of not being able to access the furlough scheme. I know that in England, many agencies have been working closely with the Treasury in order to be able to access the furlough scheme. And I'd encourage the Welsh Government to help support agencies to help their supply staff also to be able to access that as well.
Now go to Andrew Gwynn.
Thank you. I agree that all who can be at school should be. St Anne's Primary School in Denton was built in 1888. It's a small single-entry school. There are no spare classrooms, and the rooms that they have all open onto the small school hall, which is also used as the dining area. They have a very small outside yard, no playing fields where temporary classrooms can be located, and it's one example of many similar across England. So what assessment has the Secretary of State made of the number of schools which will physically struggle to accommodate all their pupils under the social distancing or educational bubble rules? And how does he plan to help them to be able to educate all children and to do so safely?
Well, when the Honourable Gentleman hopefully has the opportunity to read the guidance, he'll see from the guidance about the importance of having flexibilities for schools, such as the one he outlined, that actually are operating in a very different type of estate that maybe larger schools are able to do so. We've tried to create a clear framework of how we can give schools good advice so they can ensure the education of every single pupil. But if he has any particular issues about any of his schools that he's particularly concerned about, I know that the Minister of State for School Standards would be happy to discuss it with him.
Andy Carter.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. Schools in my constituency of Warrington South are some of the best in England, and I'm sure I can join with my right honourable friend in paying tribute to the work that heads and teachers and support staff have done over the lockdown period to care and support children. I know parents in my constituency, and in particular children, will really welcome the steps that are being announced today. Children want to get back to school, but can the Secretary of State confirm that his approach is in line with other countries around Europe who've begun to bring preschool children, younger age children back first in a phased way?
Well, he's absolutely right to pay tribute to the teachers and all the staff within the schools and nurseries and colleges within Warrington South. And they've been doing a fantastic job. But the approach that we're taking is very much in line with that of other nations. We all understand that within education settings there are constraints and restrictions that teachers and head teachers have to operate under, and we have to find practical solutions for that. And that is why we've taken a lot of time to look as to how this has been done in other countries and copy the very best practice as a result.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. Primary head teachers in my constituency tell me that there are pinch points at the start and end of each school day as children and parents come together. And school leaders are planning how they can mitigate this problem, but it may require adaptation. So they're asking, will the Secretary of State set aside funding to ensure that schools can access money to avoid this problem of people coming together?
Well, the Honourable Lady raises an important point in terms of reducing the chances of people meeting together and increasing the likelihood of transmission. That's why we've asked schools to look at the options of staggered starts for year groups so as to mitigate those chances.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. Birmingham Northfield has the highest proportion of free school meals of any constituency across the country, and so that's why it's so important that young people are back in school and back in colleges learning again. And so can I ask my right honourable friend that he ensures that as many young people as possible benefit from the COVID-19 catch-up package to ensure that some of our most disadvantaged pupils are given the greatest gift of all, which is a quality education?
Well, I know that my honourable friend in his many conversations with me has been a great champion of his schools and what is happening in his constituency. And he's right about the importance of making sure that this money is properly targeted at the children that most need it. That's why £350 million of that has been ring-fenced for those most disadvantaged, and his constituency will be one of the biggest beneficiaries of that.
Mary Kelly-Foy.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. In the City of Durham constituency, Durham University is a major player and contributes massively to the local economy, to the culture of our city and the communities. So far during this crisis, the lack of government support for universities has been scandalous, quite frankly. Universities, the staff who work for them, and the current and future students need to know that higher education is valued by this government and will be protected by it. What financial aid will the government be offering universities like Durham so that they can survive the coronavirus pandemic?
Well, we continue to work very closely with the higher education sector. We recognise the important role that they have in many communities, including the City of Durham. And we, a number of weeks ago, announced a stabilisation package. We've also set up a task force with the university sector, the Treasury, the devolved administrations, BEIS and the Department for Education in terms of research funding, and we continue to work closely with the sector to make sure there's stability within it, but it also has the ability to recover and thrive in the future.
Now go to Bob Blackman.
Harrow have continued to remain open so that children of key workers and those with special educational needs continue their education. But still, there are large numbers of children of course, whose education has slipped. Will he join me in congratulating and thanking the teachers and head teachers who've carried out and continue to provide education throughout this period, but also set out what assessment is going to be made of those children that have fallen behind, so the catch-up package is actually used to the best possible advantage to get those children back to where they should be?
Secretary of State.
I do apologise to my honourable friend because I missed the very start of his question as he was on mute, but it was without doubt the best part of it, I'm sure. And I would very much like to join my honourable friend in thanking all of those teachers, teaching assistants, school support staff who, through the very height of this pandemic, went into school every single day, opened the doors and welcomed those children of critical workers and those most vulnerable children. He picks upon a really important point, and this is why we're working so closely with head teachers and teachers, in terms of actually making sure that we identify the real needs of every single child. And in terms of a catch-up package, in terms of the tutoring, that is making sure it's absolutely targeted at their needs and delivers what they need in order for them to be able to catch up. But we do need the class teachers to be able to make those assessments for those children in order to make sure it's the most effective delivery for them.
We now go to Richard Bergen.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. We all want schools to reopen in September, but only if it's safe for pupils, teachers and the wider community. Just this week, the Health Secretary acknowledged that an unusually high rate of coronavirus infections amongst children in Leicester was part of the reason for reimposing restrictions there. In my own constituency, there's been reports of coronavirus in 3 primary schools. School reopening must be safe and led by the science. So can the Secretary of State confirm that the measures that he's announced today will be signed off as safe by the government's scientists?
Sadly, the honourable gentleman wasn't on mute, but I can absolutely assure the honourable gentleman that Public Health England have signed off all of this advice. And actually, if the honourable gentleman will take the opportunity to read what Public Health England recently said about Leicester, it states that while there have been good provision of primary school access for children since the beginning of June, researchers said that they could find no analytical link between this and any real or apparent rise in new infections in Leicester. We, on this side of the House, are all committed to opening all schools for all children of all year groups. And I look forward to working with the honourable gentleman, and many members on the other side of the House are equally committed to doing the same. But we're only doing this because we know it is safe to do so.
David Simmons.
Madam Deputy Speaker, recognising, as my right honourable friend says, the evidence shows that the risks to and connected to children are very low, mums and dads around the country will have noticed the very stringent protective measures which are being put in place in educational and childcare settings, supported by his department and implemented by multi-academy trusts and local authorities. Could my right honourable friend enlarge a little on his comment in his opening statement about further measures that he might have in mind to ensure that those risks are effectively managed when children return to their educational settings in September?
Secretary of State.
Well, absolutely, I certainly can do. I mean, we have created a strict set of sort of controls that we expect schools to follow as an absolute minimum as they see children return. These are measures that we have worked closely with Public Health England. It's making sure there's good hygiene, there's good cleaning, it's reducing the amount of contact between pupils. The system of creation of bubbles has worked successfully. And as I've touched upon, we've seen over 1.6 million children benefit from returning to school as a result of this from the 1st of June. But we do accept that more needs to be done with every child coming back. And that's why we've done such detailed guidance and will continue to support schools to bring every child back in a safe way that's not just safe for the children, but it's also safe for those who work in schools.
Alison McGovern.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. Can I ask the Secretary of State about the broad and balanced curriculum, specifically the PE and sport premium, and whether this will be guaranteed for September? Because, Madam Deputy Speaker, it is July. Decisions needed to be taken before now about sport and PE. And if head teachers and parents find out that this financial commitment has been held up for purely political reasons so the Chancellor can announce it next week, I cannot imagine how cross they are going to be.
Secretary of State.
Madam Deputy Speaker, speaking for myself, one thing I know I certainly gained during lockdown was sadly weight. And I recognise that actually getting children back into school is going, as they get back into school, making sure that they have that broad and balanced curriculum, making sure that they have proper and full access to sporting activities is so incredibly important. The Honourable Lady will just have to sort of pause a little bit, as we will be bringing absolute clarity for all schools on this issue exceptionally shortly.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. Parents across West Sussex will be welcoming today's announcement, particularly as it relates to children with special educational needs. Can I also congratulate the Shadow Education Secretary on her recent appointment? And does the Secretary of State share my hope that no one wants to see children used as political pawns, that we may now see a more constructive approach from Her Majesty's opposition?
Very much hope that we have a broad and exceptionally constructive approach right across, from all sectors of society. We are all united in the desire to see every child get that brilliant education that so many of us have benefited from. And we will always work together, and my door is always open to anyone to ensure that we deliver the very best education for every child, and that's what I will continue to do.
Munira Wilson.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. I'd like to pay tribute to the heroic teachers who've been working so hard across schools in my constituency of Twickenham, and also the September for Schools campaign led by my constituent Fiona Forbes, who's tried to make the voice of parents heard in this whole debate. And many of those parents are wondering what provision and plans will be made for wraparound care. They're on their knees juggling work and homeschooling and wondering whether they'll be able to have after-school clubs and other such provision come the autumn.
It's an important point that the Honourable Lady raises, and as part of the guidance that we've issued, we've set out clear guidance about wraparound care for schools to be able to offer, because we know how incredibly important that is for so many working parents and how it supports them in order for them to be able to do their work.
Hunt.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. As a Member of Parliament for Ipswich and an avid Newcastle United fan, I cannot think of a better name for a school than the Sir Bobby Robson School. The Sir Bobby Robson School will be opening its doors in September, and I've become an Associate Governor. It's there to specifically support children with complex emotional and mental needs. The approach that they're going to take is to have a transition period, where almost a therapeutic approach, where they really think about trying to re-socialise vulnerable young adults so that they can reintegrate and catch up. Will my right honourable friend firstly join me in wishing Sir Bobby Robson School all the best for the future, and secondly, provide them and other special schools the support they need and the external expertise they need to make sure that these vulnerable young adults have all the best chance to crack on and have a bright future?
If we're going to get everybody in, it's quite important that we have short, punchy questions to the Secretary of State and short answers too. Secretary of State.
Well, I'd very much like to welcome and sort of congratulate my honourable friend for his work with the Sir Bobby Robson School. As a Wolves fan, I'm not sure if it was quite the right person to name it after, but and I look forward to working with him and the school to make sure, as they bring children back, making sure that they actually have the best education, how we can assist them and him in terms of delivering that for those children.
Sir Geoffrey Clifton-Brown.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. I'm sure the Secretary of State would agree with the 15,000 parents in the Rock the Cotswold group who will be very disappointed if any of their children aren't able to go back into school in September. We therefore consider doing two things: as well as issuing the comprehensive guidelines, then ask every head to produce a back-to-school plan, preferably by the end of the summer holidays, by the end of the summer term.
My honourable friend raises an important point. That's very much what heads will be doing to ensure that there is full education across all year groups, in all classes, for every child, including in his constituency.
Alex Norris.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. Further education institutions were already struggling prior to this crisis, and it will only have gotten worse in recent months. Now, those very same institutions are going to have to do a Herculean effort if they're going to get their learners ready for those vital qualifications in the next academic year. Might the Secretary of State explain to further education leaders in my community why they were excluded from the COVID catch-up fund and what support will be available instead?
We continue to work very closely with the sector, a vitally important sector, as we look towards the economic recovery that we're going to be building towards as we come out of this pandemic. We'll work very closely with them in terms of actions and support that they need in order to help those youngsters who need to catch up, but equally to ensure that every further education college is fully open for September.
Jeremy Wright.
Thank you very much, Madam Deputy Speaker. My right honourable friend has already made the point that our schools make a significant contribution to the general well-being of our children as well as to their academic education. But can I ask him to recognise the sad likelihood that as children return to school in September, more of them than usual will report to teachers and others in school disturbing or abusive experiences they've had during the lockdown period, either physical or virtual? And can he confirm that our schools will have the support they